Oi, gente!
Hello, everyone. We've got to the seventh day. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. She's representing very well the feeling of a whole team. We arrived here on Monday, the 11th, with feelings, with the feeling, with the intention to create a stage where all voices could echo, where significant stories could have their truth told. We've dreamt about diverse experiences. We dreamt of exchanges and arriving here at the seventh day and realizing that everything that we planned happened. It's a satisfaction that if you see anyone from our team, you see what I'm feeling. So I'd like to thank everyone who are making this Floop 24 happening. You as audience, as well as the producers, the interpreters, the people from the security, the cameraman. I'd like to ask for a round of applause for everybody who worked together. And we're now here today. I'm stepping for the first time on the stage. My name is Amanda Gabriela, MC from Floop 24, and I'm very glad to be here with you today. We will have an international presence at the panel, so for you to follow everything, please get your headphones on the counter for simultaneous translation. Remembering that after the panel, please, I ask you dearly to please return the headphones and get your documents because since it's the last day for presentations, how are you going to get your documents back? Don't ask me. Nobody told me. Uh, but anyways, let's go to the last panel. I'm already missing this, but for sure it will be emotional like all the voices that echoed here. We've reached the last panel of the best debate of Floop 24. It's been 7 days proposing to interpret the world through the Quilombo of Beatriz Nascimento, being crafts women of ourselves because this is a dream of women and the night never sleeps. In Atlantic, we create bonds between the shards of time and space. With Ashe, black women advance and tell their stories. Strong women, capable of creating solutions, changing situations, and make peace. It's important to talk about ourselves. We need to talk about ourselves, our quilombos, and creating images for our quilombo. We know that the roots, the big transformations come from the roots. But after all, what is more current than ancestrality? What else can disturb the colonial structure rather than a black woman that writes? The craft women of ourselves in this panel, the images, crafting ourselves, the images we create for our Colombo will accompany the reflections of women who are writing, creating new images of the world. The writer Ana Paula Lisboa shares her life between Brazil and Rwanda. Besides being a colonist, she writes the newsletter called Cabeça de Sardinha, and for Jornal Globo, besides editing the community newspaper Maré de Notícias. With her, we'll also have Josephine Apraku, that studies African studies and intersectional anti-racist literature. And why do social networks separate us and how we find ourselves? This book explores the impact the oppression has on our romantic relationships and how we can learn to deal with that. Josephine Apraku is part of Floop with the support of Goethe Institute and European Union. Thank you for the partnership. So in the mediation of this very important panel, the translator, literary critic, and poet Jess Oliveira, finalist of the Jabuti Prize that translated authors such as Denise Ferreira da Silva, Bell Hooks, Yves Odoy, Maya In, Grada Quilomba, and Patricia Collins, besides texts from Tatiana Nascimento, Lélia Gonçalves, and our dear Leda Maria Martins that received our award yesterday for English and German. So I'd like to ask you, to invite you to the stage. Come, girls. Round of applause for her, for them.
Boa noite.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to thank Floop for the invitation. To everyone who's here, who came here to listen to us, I'd like to thank you for all the conversations that I was able to witness throughout Floop, throughout those 2 days that I've been here. They were really important conversations. I've met people that I really admire. Thank you, Josephine Apraku, and thank you, Ana Paula Lisboa, for composing this panel, being part of it. And it's a great responsibility. It's the last panel of Floop, so I'm a little bit nervous, but we will be able to conclude trying to honor everybody that went through this stage, this one, and in the other editions, in the future editions that will come. So our panel and this topic, crafting ourselves, really touched me because I understand my work as a translator mainly as this craftsmanship of creating and recreating, dialoguing with authors that are from abroad, Brazil, and also from Brazil to abroad as well, as this craftsmanship of creating images that maybe were not available to us here in Brazil. These images and these thoughts that sometimes do not get to us because of the language, and also do the other way around, translating thinkers like Lélia Gonçalves and Tatiana Nascimento, Leda Maria Martins, and makes their thoughts travel abroad through my work. That many times is also a collective work. So I'd like to start by reading a poem of an author that I really like and that really changed my life from the academic point of view and also in the personal point of view. It's called Maya In. It's a very important author for the intellectual, cultural, and political black movements in Germany. So I'll read it in German, and I'll read my translation to Portuguese as well. The poem is called
Pocketkamera. Erinnerungen aus Ostafrika. Und das, was du gelernt hast, darüber bereits es auf mir abzuladen. Die Maasai, bewundernswert, ihr lachend und trotz der Hungerbäuche sind die Kinder glücklich. Den letzten Urlaub hast du dort verbracht und willst mich tanzen sehen, damit die Bilder wieder greifbar werden. Ich schaue dich an und in die Ferne, in die Vergangenheit, vor und zurück und suche nach einem Grund, dich Schwester zu nennen. Agora em português.
now in Portuguese. A monolith in black and white. You see me behind your pocket camera. Memories of West Africa. And what you've read about that ready to unload on me. The Admiral Mansell's, their smiles, and despite their starving stomach, happy kids. The last vacations, the highest holidays, you went there and you want to see me dancing so that the memories and the images can also be seen. I look at you, I look away and to the past. I look to the future and to the past, and I search for a reason to call you my sister. This poem was written by Maya In, as I said, in 1989, and I bring it to open our conversation because I believe that it works and it brings those colonial images that are thrown on us all the time. And what do we do with those images? How do we survive those images? What do we do to make our work and to escape from these images every day? So I'd like to ask you to warm up our conversation thinking about this poem and about your work. I want to ask you if you believe that it's possible to change these images, the images of ourselves, our individual and collective images. And how did you reach that? If you think about that, and how did you reach this process of thinking that there is an abyss many times between the images that we have of ourselves, the dreams that we have for ourselves, and how the world does these confrontations with these images? And what are the joys and difficulties of dealing with that all the time? Just that, right? Okay. Do you want to start, Josephine? Good evening, Floop. I have a fan club. Wow. Thank you. Of course, once again, I'd like to thank Julio, thank the production team, all the teams, the workers at Floop. We were saying that we didn't even know that we were the last panel of Floop, so I'm very glad to be here this year. And I'd like to greet everyone who's here, those who we can see and those who we can't see right now. It's very good to be here. It's great to be at the Circo Voador. This circus, this place is my home. I've been a student of the Zanzar group that is here every Monday occupying this stage for over 5 years. A lot of what I know about the respect from the streets came from the Zanzar group. A lot of what I know about ancestrality, Brazilian popular culture, Afro-Brazilian culture was taught to me here at Zanzar. In our rounds, I continue to call it ours, every last Thursday of the month under the arches and the jungle rounds in Lapa. This is where I learned to respect the streets, and not only respect it, but how to dance with the streets, with the people from the streets, the people that live on the streets, those who we could see and those who we could not see. And Circo Voador, this flying circus, is on the streets. We seem that we are on a space, but we are actually on the streets right now. These fences do not separate us from the street. And more than that, I've worked for over 7 years of my life here in one of those streets in Lapa neighborhood. So I'm very glad in many ways to be here. Now, answering Jazz, this very deep question. I'm a person who lives for 7 years in the African continent. I live in Luanda, in Angola. And I went to Luanda for the first time in 2016. When you talked about images, I remember that. I went to Luanda for the first time in November 2016. So we just completed 8 years of my first time there. And I was working a lot. I continue to work a lot, a little bit less now, but I used to work a lot more than what I do today. So every time they ask me, but how did you get to Luanda? I have a friend that we met here in Rio de Janeiro, really best friend. We work together. Luana her father is from Angola. Her mother's from here. She lived her adolescence in Luanda, and she was in the process of going back. And she invited me. I'm going to Luanda. I'll spend some days. Don't you want to go with me? And I said, of course. And I went on this first trip. But it was that. I was working too much, so I didn't plan much the trip or research much what I wanted to do there. And Angola, this has improved a lot in the last years, but Angola is not a country that you can find easily on Google Maps, or you can find images that easily. It's a country that you get to know, or a city that you get to know much better if you know somebody who is from there, who lives there, and I had this this luck. I was luckily I met all her family. I was adopted by a very nice family there. But for the first time that I went, I was very much delighted with the city because I had few images on my mind about Luanda. So everything that I saw was very new to me. But ever since the first day I stepped on Luanda, I was very careful with the kind of images that I was going to produce about Luanda because I know very well what is the image that people expect to see from the African culture, African continent, and I didn't want to corroborate with that. And because I knew that just like Rio de Janeiro and just like Brazil, and especially Rio de Janeiro, that is a very mediatic city that is so much exhibited to the world on film, photos. Those who are from Rio knows the images that we have. I'm seeing these arches recently painted, so I know what it's like, and I know what it's like a few days later. You see it with graffiti after the rain when it's wet. So I'm from a city in which we have a lot of images produced, and I'm from the favela, and I know the image that what people expect to see from a favela forever. So I've always been careful not to collaborate with this idea. So all these images that I produced from Luanda in these last years are powerful images, but because this is how I see that country and that city, and this is the image that I want to build and collaborate to construct, to build, because this is what we do on our Instagram, or Facebook, X, or whatever, or on WhatsApp. And it's with that artificial intelligence create new images, and after what we produce, based on what we produce, and I believe that understanding myself in this place of image producer also made me perceive myself as a producer of my image. Luanda really made me, for sure, or any country would make me a different person. But of course, living in an African city, living in a country where 95% of the people are black, even though there are all its particularities about what is a black person and what type of blackness that is completely different than Brazil, and it made me build a different image of myself. I even changed my name in Luanda because I've always been Ana Paula, and when I got to Luanda, Ana Paula was the name of the first lady. And every time I spoke my name, they made a joke about it. Oh, it's the same first lady, and I got tired of that, and I started saying just Anna, and I'm only Anna. And I was thinking about that. I even changed my name on in that city. So I believe I changed the way I dress a lot because despite it being as hot as Rio de Janeiro, only afterwards I noticed that people from Rio walk naked on the street. I didn't know that, but we do.
So I had to change my wardrobe and many things I had to change during this time. My hair also, uh, I'm not very decisive, although they use a lot of braids. I change my hairset all the time. So many options of braids and so much cheaper because here you have a braid 1 2 months because you have to renew it, and there they change their braids every week. So there's so many options. You cannot just decide. So I remain with my hair like it is because it's easier. So I think that it has been a construction, and I think I have discovered that it's infinitive. But surely the way that I'm being considered and seen, oh, I mean, know when I'm wearing a braid. If I don't open my mouth, people will look at me if I'm from Angola, that I lived abroad because I have tattoos and piercings, so I'm modern. Or if I'm Angolan that lived abroad, they've already asked me. They asked me a lot if I'm from Ethiopia, and I discovered that I have some traces from Ethiopia. But Jenny, when I lose hair, they've asked me if I'm from Cape Verde because I have a lighter colored hair. I was kind of blonde. But if I'm wearing a braid, I seem like Angolan. It's different from the way that I am. The security guard from them, they think that I am from Angola. And it's different from the way they see me. They think that I am really, some specificities make me more Brazilian and, or more, to be a foreigner maybe. They think I'm a foreigner, I don't know. And I saw that this is a construction that is not defined yet, perhaps in what I am. But it's great. I think it's great. It's a great sensation. I think it's a sensation of being able to choose. I think the optional choice is something that I didn't have in Rio de Janeiro, or at least it was lesser than the one that I have in Uganda. And I think this is a privilege to be able to choose who I want to be. So that, I think it's great. Thank you. Changes also of the image is as you said, besides being a place of choice, is also a place that is necessary to be adapted, to live other realities. That's quite interesting. Thank you. Josephine, do you want to say some words? I'm going to repeat the question because she didn't understand the question. She wasn't. Acho que
Bom,
my first question, can you hear me, Josephine? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Yes? Higher? I'm almost shouting. Hello, hello?
Josephine, you can also set the volume on your device. You can turn it up. It's on maximum. Okay. Anyways, okay. Am I louder than her? Maybe I'll speak now, and then I'll pass the floor to her. I'll pass the microphone to her when she has to translate you. Okay. So I'll repeat the question once again. So in summary, so the first question, so that we can warm up this conversation. So it's part of the poem from Maya Inder read. And I want to ask you that if for you it's possible to change the images that the world has about you, and that all the time, despite of us doing things that the world doesn't imagine, that we write, that we read, that we think, that we travel, the world all the time comes and gives a punch in our face with other images that reflect in a specific colonial past, a very hetero cisgender past, but sexist past. Do you believe in this process? Is it possible for you individually and collectively change these images of ourselves? And when you notice that, and what is this process for you, the difficulties and the happiness and the joys of doing this work?
One more time. Before I say anything, I need to say, Julio, thank you so much for inviting me. I want to come back. I don't need to be paid. I just want to come back. It's true. I think it's really good that you said that there are two things, collectively and individually, and for a really long time in my life, for I would say nearly 20 years, I've been doing work on German colonialism, anti-racism, So quite a bit of the work that I do really kind of caters to changing images, but not necessarily only about myself as a Black person, but also because I work with white people a lot. There are many of them in Germany. I feel like part of my work is not only for me, but it's also for white people too. So that is a huge part of my work. But I do have to say, and I think that is where I am at personally in this very moment, is that I'm also very much interested in kind of freeing myself, because I feel like doing this kind of work, and it reminds me of something that Oyeronke Oyewumi was saying when she was here having her discussion. She was talking about how decolonization somehow also always chains us to whiteness, because when we are always kind of decolonizing this and that and everything in between, we are also always dealing with whiteness that has inserted itself into our lives. And I, for myself, can say that that is very much true. So I was thinking about something that I read, which is, I forgot the name of the author, I'm very sorry about that, but the book is called The Right to Sex. And she talks about how we kind of have to discipline ourselves and the ways in which we view and perceive the world. And I do have to say, I think there's truth in that. And by that, she means discipline not in a negative sense, but she means that we have to start and look around and love people and see people who are like us. And I do have to say, I feel like that's true, and I think that's part of the truth. But I can also say, when we talk about identity, and I identify as a Black non-binary person, as a neurodivergent person, as a person with German citizenship, as a person who also has, been in academia, and like all of those things are parts of myself, but those are the parts that are made up by society. And I feel like sometimes it's like the other parts that I am made up of, some kind of fairy dust and dreams and all of those things. I feel like sometimes they kind of get buried underneath the things that we sometimes have to and also want to claim as identity. So for me, I feel like at this very moment, I am very much on a journey of finding peace, of being a person who dreams, of being a person who romanticizes things, of being a person who loves. And I think all of this also, like the moment of freeing myself from having to refer to myself through the lens of identities, is also the moment where it's easier for myself to not only love me, but to discipline the perspective that I have on others. Because if I'm not able to humanize myself in front of myself, it gets much harder to humanize everyone around me. So if I'm not able to understand myself as a human being who happens to be Black, who happens to be this and that, I think it's hard for me to kind of get into all of the things that are also part of being human, that very often, and I think that's also part of, the kind of the group that I am in, sometimes gets buried because we kind of start to analyze and intellectualize all of the things. But I feel like there's also so much wonder to be had. And I feel like that's where I am. And I also very strongly feel that that is also a moment where we kind of deconstruct the idea of identity. And I had this moment after I experienced racist trauma. I was walking through the park. I had been journaling and talking to a therapist and all of those things. And I had this moment where I was walking through the park and I thought, okay, what do I have to kind of reflect to feel better? And my brain in this very moment said, just be. And it sounds so simple, it sounds so cheesy, but like this moment of being in the moment, allowing myself as a person who in Germany
is always hyper visible, and at the same time, with the things that I need, the protection that I need, I am invisible. And my brain allowing myself to say, just be in this moment. You don't have to reflect. You don't have to look over your shoulder. You just walk through the park. And you breathe in, and you breathe out, and you take one step and the next step. And all of those kinds of small things are so relevant to kind of, on a personal level, deconstruct the images that I'm always confronted with. And also they help me talking to other people, regardless of their positionality with regards to racism, in finding their humanity and being able to understand and see that not only in themselves, but also in others. Because I feel like, and that's something I feel like we don't talk about as much, oppression creates different groups, but it dehumanizes all of us. White people are not what whiteness is. No one is anything of that. And I think kind of taking a step back, or several actually, and kind of looking in the mirror and understanding, who am I? Without, if I don't cling to this, who am I? So I feel like it's, yeah, I think it's, to me, it's a journey at this very moment that is actually filled with joy, because I feel like I need to take a break from only educating, but also simply being.
Uau! Que bom ouvir isso, né? E ser lembrada que é possível.
How nice to see this and to, can you hear me? Can you hear me now, Josephine? Yes? Okay, thank you. To know that we have the right and that it's possible to be, to exist out of the boxes that they always put us inside. Yesterday, Anna, you spoke of something at the table that you were mediating, you with the Professora Lida Martins, and with Chinaga Calaf. You said that you moved to Luanda because of your problems, but it seems to me, listening to Josephine also, that there's a search for being. A search, as you said just now, that Luanda and Angola gave you the possibility of trying to change and to be yourself. Do you see any relation with this, or is it something else that you're thinking about when you talk about having other problems? I think there's a practical thing, other problems. I'm very good at solving problems, and I create many problems also, in order for me able to find myself good at solving them. But there's a practical thing of the problem. But let's go back to your previous question, because I remember something that's happened a lot when I started to call myself a writer. It happened a lot. And then I am not myself, nor yourself, nor Josephine. We're not the image. When you talk about writer, people start to think, you have an image in your mind. Generally, it's not us. The first image that comes to your mind doesn't seem like us. And it used to happen a lot when I used to meet someone, I was introduced to someone, and the person used to ask me, what do you do in Brazil, mainly here in Brazil? And the people say, what do you do? And I used to say, I'm a writer. And you should see in the face of the people. Remember the YouTube in the past when you used to open a video and it gave that, they used to take a long time to load. That was the image I used to see in their face. And I used to say, I'm a writer. And the people used to look at me, and it took a long time to say, oh, how nice. And what do you write? It was always like this image, a basic image. I created a metaphor of loading a YouTube. Nowadays it's less, but it was very recurrent at that time. So I think at the beginning, I myself had to change this image of writer in my mind. And always that it happens a lot in the Floop. And for the second time, I was a mentor in a process of Floop in 2020, now this year, for new writers. And in 2020, only women. And this year we had one male in my group, Patrick. And I noticed, and the most of the were black women in both groups. And I noticed a lot of difficulty when I used to say to this person, oh no, because you're a writer. It was something, it seemed that I was just saying bad words to her. It was very difficult to accept this. No, I just started. I'm beginning now. I just wrote something, very few things. It was very difficult for them to name themselves writers because we also have the imagination in our mind, and sometimes it doesn't fit for us to be in a place of a writer. This happens with doctors and dentists. A short time ago, I was explaining in Luanda what it was to be. Every time I saw a Brazilian person, I recognized Brazilian people by the way they walk. I swear to you, I see the Brazilians by the way they walk. And something also that I recognize Brazilians is their blonde hair. And I used to explain to the Angolan what was odonto blonde. And that's it, the image of a student of, a dentistry, yes. A blonde student of dentistry. So to change this image is work that we have. But answering your question, I remember what it is. New problems. I don't know. I was watching on the Tigrillo on Friday, and Sueli Carneiro speaking about philosophy. I was sat there and I said, I think I'm going to study philosophy. And then I said, no, I have to have a contest. It's going to be very difficult to have another graduation. But I'm very interested in studying philosophy. Although I do read a lot about this subject, but African philosophy, black women philosophy, Brazilian ones, philosophers like Dona Sueli, and I think that part of being human, that is the first, perhaps that's the first greatest black need in Brazilian diaspora, to be considered human. It makes us to still be a philosophical place. We're making philosophy about our existence, about our life, about who we are, where we come from, where we're going to. We were talking about this, having very little ancestral reference. It stops in our grandfather, great-grandfather. We cannot go back a lot back. We have to have a DNA exam. This is philosophy. We're trying to find a sense, not only
finding, but I've been thinking philosophically about that, about how to build. And this is a key of our generation. And I believe we're still searching for things, but at the same time, meanwhile, we're still building who we are. And meanwhile, I really mean meanwhile, in crossed timelines, because at the same time, we're building one thing, the other day you're meeting, and then you build something else, and then you find something else. So I have the great privilege that my grandmother is still alive, and I had many experience with her. I remember I didn't do the DNA test. First of all, because I don't think I want to. I have a lot of data of myself already spread throughout the world. I've did many blood tests. My DNA is already spread around the world. I don't want to sell it to any company. It's not a need of mine. Maybe due to my great-grandmother, because she's so close to me that she's enough for me, in that sense. But I believe that's it. My life in Luanda is this process. I find myself a lot, even though I know that, as Leda said beautifully, she said in Luanda as well as here yesterday, those who go and come back is not the same who went, is the one that comes back. So I came back somehow as a contemporary ancestor, and I come back all the time to Rio de Janeiro. This is always a place I come back, and I always come back different. But at the same time, I'm building something, and I like this construction process. I've been like, it's not that I've always liked it, but I've been liking it. Oh, this is what I'm doing. This is mine. This is from my mom. This is from my grandmother, but this is mine. And it's good. I've been thinking that it's nice getting old. We were kidding that Julio called our panel a youth panel, and I said, I don't know, I'm not sure about it. I've been loving to get old in that sense of building and constructing, looking at and being able to have something physical. Sometimes I look at myself and I feel like a building, a construction. And sometimes you paint the walls, you build another story. So it's nice to do that. Unfortunately, this is a privilege. Most of the black population, especially the black Brazilian population, is just living one day after the other. And it's a lot. There's a lot of people dying, by the way. I'm sure of that. So I've been trying to make use of this privilege of being able to do that. Thank you, Anna. When you speak of that experience of the downloading, the loading sign, it's in the people's minds, it's an experience that I experience every day when I say that I'm a translator. It's not also the image of a translator that they have. The translation job is highly intellectualized in Brazil and throughout the world as well, but here it seems like there is an ethereal image of a translator that has access to different cultures, and that he can travel, he can empower himself with those cultures, he can travel, he can speak other languages, and my image is not the one that matches this imaginary. So in my work, I have to be visible in the sense of not empower myself of the text that I'm translating, but dialoguing with the text that I'm translating, updated to my reality for the communities that I know and for my imaginary audience for this work. And I have to do this great trip of understanding what was the author wanted to say at that moment, and how do I bring that, how do I update that linguistically as well as ethically. So to me, translating is also a way to change those images. Just let me comment, Jess. I remembered what Écio Salles, the creator of Floops, mentioned very much, is that it was not enough, and not only him, but I remember Écio saying that it was not enough for us to have black people writing. We needed to have black people reading, black people criticizing literature, black women translating as well. We need to be in all fronts. Oh, there are so many black writers. Okay, but are they reading those black writers? Those who are what about those who are translating to Portuguese? So this work is very important. This chain, actually, because sometimes we isolate ourselves and think everything is solved. It's not. There are many loopholes and there are many problems, editors and so on. Yes, in this whole chain, and this whole diversity. And what do we do to organize ourselves transnationally, politically, if we don't understand ourselves as black population from the diasporas, So at many times the language that serves to oppress and for many centuries oppressed us can be a tool of subversion of this oppression. And now going back to our topic on how we create images for our Quilombo, I want to ask Josefina that if a Quilombo or a Maroon community is a sign, an image, a place that you imagine, what is that concept to you? And I went to live in Germany with 20 years old. This was the first time I left the country. I was 20 years old, and I was lost. I was studying German literature, and I understanding, but having difficulty to express what I was going through and the places that I was being put all the times. I was going to enroll at the university, and she said not to become pregnant. The lady told me, the one that was doing my enrollment in the college. And I was like, what? So going through these situations, I was lost for a while. Why am I studying German? Why I'm outside the place that was imagined for me, and finding what I can call a Quilombo in Berlin, specifically in Germany, was extremely important for my survival, my physical integrity, psychological, emotional, intellectual integrity. So when I find Maisha, Natasha Kelly, when I see Maya Ing, and that translates my experience in Germany, I see that I found a Quilombo there, a Quilombo community there. At the time, I didn't use this word, but I want to know for you is if Quilombo is a concept, if it's a word that inhabits your imaginary. What is your relationship with this concept of Quilombo, with this history in Germany and outside Germany as well?
So because I talk and think about race, specifically in Germany so much, I think at some point my perspective really started to change, because when we talk about Blackness, very often we talk about oppression, and I feel like, yes, that has its place, but I think there are so many more layers to it, and I think that's pretty much where, to me, this question is going, which is, when I think about Blackness, I think about homecoming. I think about how I can go to a different country and there will be people who look like my aunties and my siblings and my family. So, and that is a feeling, by the way, that I have very strongly also when I come to Brazil, which is why I love to come to Brazil, because there's so many Black people, and I think it's really kind of hard to understand, if you've never been to Germany, how much less Black people there are. So just being able to see Black people getting old, seeing old Black people, is such a beautiful feeling. It's really hard to explain, honestly. So for me, this is really Blackness. Blackness is a form of homecoming. It's a form of, to me, it's also a kind of imagination. It's a dream. There is something that binds us. There is something that I recognize. And when I come here, for example, it's part of Yoruba culture, for example, because I grew up with a stepdad who is from Nigeria, who is Yoruba. So that really influenced me. I didn't know when I was little, but it really influenced me. So I think for me, this concept simply is Blackness, honestly. It's knowing that I can go somewhere and knowing that people will receive me, and there is something that they understand about me, and there's something that I understand about them, regardless of the work that you do, which is translating. There is an aspect of myself that doesn't need translation. And I feel like this is a shift with regards to what I feel like, which also connects what we are saying. It's a shift in perspective where I claim something that I am not supposed to claim, that I love something that I am not supposed to love. So to me, I think the very simple answer would be blackness.
To Ana Paula now, I want to ask you, still traveling around Angola, because we have this will of going, and you came from there, so you can bring this news as well. So to you, the fact of living and writing from Angola, does that change the images? You said that you're very careful about the images that you produce and identifying with you, because working with translation, I try to be very ethical and careful regarding the words that I choose to translate. They don't merely need to make sense or have a story or tell a story. Oh, in the 60s they used this word, so it's okay, I'll use it. No, nowadays we use different words. The Black movement woke up and removed some terms. So I'm very careful in my translation, in my practice, which is a collective practice as well. So to you, writing from there, changing this perspective, how does that change the images or not? What is this relationship with the care that you have regarding the images that you reproduce or not? And the shift that you understand, what does change for you and for those who read you in your work, I mean, specifically? What Angola changed in your work, and what is your relationship of care with these images, and what is your relationship in general with the continent? Angola made me calmer. The last time I came to Rio in May this year, and it was funny, I was almost 2 years without coming here. So when I got here, I was scared because in 2 years, many things had happened. Every time I arrived, for instance, now I came in May, now I came in November, there's a new card, there's not real card anymore into public transportation. So there's always something new, and I take my time to equalize. And when I came in May, I was scared with the amount of, it was motorcycles, it was after Uber motorcycles, a lot of skateboards, peoples. And I remember, and when I came to Luanda, when I came down my beating, I stopped on the street. I was already tense. I had to look to one side and the other. And then I remembered, wait, no, I'm in Luanda. I won't be ran over at any moment, because I was with this feeling that I was going to be ran over at any moment here. So the place, writing is a manual labor. I have 1,000 notebooks. I really like handwriting. Poetry, I only do by handwriting. And the art is another area of my brain that can only be expressed by hand, on the handwriting. But of course, I write on my computer as well. So since writing is a manual labor, it's automatically connected to my body. So having the body less tense, less concerned, not only if I'm going to be run over, but if there will be a police operation, or if what time do I have to be mindful. Of course, Luanda is a big city. I have to be mindful. I'm a black woman, so I know that unfortunately, I need to be careful about my body, with my body. But it's a different kind of problem, other kinds of care. And not having these problems specifically from the day-to-day influences my writing, because it's directly connected to my body. For instance, Thursday, I had forgotten that it was the day before a holiday, and I went to Maré Favela, and I went to Brazil Avenue. I went downtown, and I lived in Maré for a while. It's my home. It's my country. And I was impressed. How did I do that every day? I couldn't grasp that. My body didn't have that memory of every day taking Avenue, Brazil Avenue, which is a very busy avenue here in Brazil, many lanes. And that made me tense. I came back by bus and then VLT, and then I came here and then I walked back to Lapa, and I was wondering, how did I do that every day? It's really unhealthy. Really, I felt very bad about that. And this is the struggle of the big cities for quality of life quality, because, and it's very surreal that we have to go through that. And it's surreal that it's surreal, not spending 2 hours in traffic. And it was only Maré, and I was talking to the driver that brought me here that lives in Bangu neighborhood. So it's much worse for those who live in the West Zone and in Baixada Fluminense, and they come every day to Rio de Janeiro in this 6-to-1 scale. They work 6 days and rest only one. I don't know if it's in this last 7 years. It's clear. Simas says that life always finds a path, and we're always trying to become delighted by it. But honestly, I don't know if I would have written as much as I've written, and I believe that I didn't write as much in these last 7 years. If I was living in Rio, I wouldn't have written so much. So less tension on my body made me write more, made me write differently. I can't explain how, because I don't have a parameter to compare, as if I was here, to compare with if I was here. But my comparison is that it's a calmer place. I have other problems. It's a place where I can decide. I'm a columnist for O Globo newspaper for almost 9 years. Next year, it's been almost 10 years that I write for that newspaper and from Rio. And it's been 10 years that I'm the only black columnist of the second paper, which is a column about culture. So in my first year of column, and I tell this in every place, I thought that I would stay at Globo for 6 months the most. And I said, okay, I entered on March. I'll stay there for 6 months. So I wanted to write everything that I thought that had to be on these pages, because if I'm going to stay only for 6 months, then they'll say, no, I don't want you anymore. So I wrote everything. I talk about Nova Holanda, baile, the ball that they had there, the party, everything that I wanted. And after 6 months, I looked and said, oh, I can write about other things as well. And having left here made me think even more about that, about these other things that are not only the things that I must, and I have an ancestor mission of doing. Riani, who was here, I always remember of that. Once I was in a panel with her, and she told me that for her, it was an ancestor's mission to write for her. And I took this speech to myself. Being a columnist of a Globo is an ancestor's mission.
So I have what is mine. I see what I write. I say, what do I want to write today? What do I want to write this week? So I think perhaps if I were here living, I would have more missions to keep. And I think being abroad, I can see and say, today I want to write about spring, or today I want to write about someone that broke my heart, or sometimes I want to write about a brother, my grandmother, my family, because I'm a writer, and a writer has to be able to write whatever he wishes. That we have to have this freedom. Although I'm a black and favelada writer, a Brazilian woman, I want to be able to write about anything. That's the freedom of art, to be able to choose what I want to do. And I think this is the main change, to see these possibilities that perhaps here I wouldn't see them so much. I spoke a lot. I'm sorry. These words of Anna, I'm going to call you Anna now. makes me ask Josephine, why, Josephine, you choose to write about love? Because for me, it was a gift to translate your book this year, and involved a lot of love on my side. I did the work with my translation partner, one of my partners, Raquel Alves, she's living in Salvador now, and it was very nice to translate your book, because I've been usually translating heavy and dense books with philosophy, with European thought, more than thinking. That many times it makes us. It's very difficult to understand and to read. It demands a lot physically, and it's quite difficult. When I was translating Denise Ferreira da Silva, there were a lot of content, and she starts breaking the modern tools, and you remain without the tools that you have, because we have the tools, modern thinking tools. It's incredible. It's an extremely freeing process. And this year I received some gifts. That was to translate Josephine book that talks about social justice, and what does love have to do with social justice. It's something that we don't think a lot about. We think about struggle and militance and in war terms, let's say, that we're going to marches, that we're struggling, and that's what we usually do. But to think about intimate relationships and how they can change the world, I think it was very important for me. It was, I want to know why you choose to write about love, and for you to talk about your work with children literature also. That hasn't been translated to Portuguese, but what does it have to do with your future and with your past also? Which are your views when you talk about and write about these subjects? Eu acho que até certo.
Personal life, I tend to struggle a lot, and I feel like it's important to understand that when we understand the function of oppression, that we start to also realize that it's all around us all of the time. And I had a conversation with Ayoko Mensah, who's at this festival as well, and she was saying that to her, it seems important to write about this, because when she was younger, like 20 years ago, she didn't have anything to kind of connect her personal experience with oppression within loving relationships to a kind of broader understanding of that. And at least for myself, I can say it's true. Like, when I remember my first relationships, there was like one distinct point. I was, like, the first partner that I had was a white, heterosexual, cis German man. And I remember we had a discussion on I don't know what. And at some point he said, well, you know, but if all else fails, I'm in favor of normal. And then I looked at him. I was only 15 years old. And I was like, so if you say you're in favor of normal, that also means you're not in favor of me. I did understand that on a very basic level. At that point, I didn't necessarily connect it to any kind of theory, but I understood that there was something in the person who claimed to love me a lot, actually, that was also against me at the same time. And I think that's really what I wanted to talk about, because I think in a society where we're always surrounded by different kinds of oppression, be it ableism, be it classism, be it racism, you know, be it cissexism, all of those things, they condition us in the ways in which we behave towards other people. And that is also very much relevant to love relationships. And I could tell from my own experience that when I was with a white man, it wasn't necessarily him, but I would become a kind of social project, at least to parts of his family members. And to me, there was just this question, so if all of this is true, so if there's oppression in our society, and I can tell it's also dividing me from the people who claim to love me. What is love then? What do I mean when I say to someone, I love you? What is it that I want to connect with? What is it that I want to overcome? And I think that pretty much was the basic question that I was kind of thinking about when I was writing this book, but also I think a society that socializes us, you know, within violence and always being surrounded by violence will not in any way, shape, or form support us or give us the tools to actually be loving. So I was, very simply put, I was wondering about that, and I think that's why it was important to me. But also, I think the other aspect that you kind of also touched upon was that if we understand oppression, or if we're open to understand oppression on this very intimate level, that is also relevant for myself. I didn't write this book, you know, to give to all of the people who hold more privilege than you, but it's also very much for myself as well, for my younger sister, to really take a look at yourself and think about how does my experience with marginalization actually condition me to behave in certain ways, that I give away the power that I actually have in setting boundaries, in being self-loving and saying, yes, I need to be cared for, and those are the exact ways that I need to be cared for. So for me, it was also a question of not only saying, okay, let's simply fix the problem of the relationship between two people or more people and all will be fine. That's not at all the perspective that I have. But I do believe that if we start to kind of exercise the ways in which we can be loving towards other people that take oppression into account, that is something that we also carry into the world. That is not something that we kind of strip ourselves of and kind of like a t-shirt take off and, you know, put to the side. But I think it's something that we can also take into the workplace or wherever we go.
I'm going to read part of the book that really called my attention a lot. That is part that Josephine is talking about limits. And it was, in fact, I translated the paragraph, I started crying or weeping a little bit, and I remembered my own personal stories, and you caught something very important about limits. We know that we as Black people, born or understood as female, it's very difficult to work with limits. I'm going to read this part. Love is the absence of violence. And this is just as easy as it seems. The focus of this book is structural violence, that is, discrimination. And this automatically imposes limits to our definition of love. Limits against things that don't work for us in relationships, that make us victims of our connection and continue with the oppression. This is something good, a circumstance that we can become aware of it and use it. If love means X for us, then Y is not good. If we want to face critically social inequality in our relationships, it is important for us to identify very clearly where are limits. With what behavior do we have availability to face it, which behaviors we don't tolerate, and which are the conditions for this. But our limits in loving relationships are a wall that separates us, are a contact point that ideally represent moments that are very balanced between what we feel and what we do and say. An act of balance where we remain in our own center and at the same time we're able to connect ourselves with the other party. We need to have autonomy and connection. However, our limits are not always so balanced. They can be very strict or preamble too much. And when I read this, my mind just exploded because I had a specific relationship that when I said, this is my limit, the person understood that I was breaking up. And when Josephine mentions about this idea that limits is a connection point, is a point when we stop and balance the relationship and think and look at the other person and say, well, I love this person, I'm going to respect this limit, I'm going to try and deal with this, and then as of this, we will be stronger. This was wonderful. I would like to thank you very much for this and for many other gifts that this book brings, including each chapter at the end. It brings a list of questions for us to self-ask ourselves. Some collective ones, some individual ones, so I indicate this book very much. Now I would like to read a poem of Beatriz Nascimento for us to speak a little bit our relationship with the nation and with this idea of Quilombo also that is in the title of our round table and is mentioned here sometimes during our words. The poem is called November 20. And Beatriz wrote it in 1989. That was the same year that it was written, the Mayain poem that I read at the beginning. And it's important for me because I think a lot about these two diasporas. And yes, and this morning we were having breakfast and Josephine said, what happens here is important for me. I want you to know. And it's the same thing that I feel regarding other places. What happens to Luanda is also important for me. I want you to know, but many times this information doesn't reach us. Oh, we only have images that we don't want to see. We're tired of seeing the images. So I'm going to read the poem on the same year of the other poem of Mayain. Just a second. November 20. The Quilombo is memory. That doesn't happen only for its members. It happens for the nation. It happens and it starts during crisis of nationality. We have to value history. We have to see the continuity of history because we want to make the Brazilian nation with Indians and black people. You have to have a national project in a traumatic way, but not so traumatic as the Western have done, destroying cultures, destroying history of the original people, the dominated people. In this poem, Beatriz thought a lot in Quilombo. She updated what we understand as Quilombo, and she criticized also the project of Quilombo. In this poem, I understand that she is saying that as a national project, it is traumatic because we don't fit in a national project. Denise, if you're going to see what says this also in Homos Modernos, she says that the categories won't save us. Category is the problem. We were categorized as female, as black, and many other adjectives. So I think this is a problem. I've seen other theories of gender say that gender is a problem also. The category. So I would like to think with you, how do you think about nation? What is the relation of you with nation? With the Brazilian nation, or from Angola, or the German nation? Which is the relation that you create? Is it a comfortable one, of home, of fleeing? I would like for you to say something about this, please. For me, as I mentioned yesterday, Brazil is not my home anymore. Rio de Janeiro is not my home. My home is in Luanda. She just mentioned the address. But Rio de Janeiro is my country. Rio de Janeiro is my city. Brazil is my country. Sometimes in Luanda, they make some jokes with me. They say they're going to give me an Angolan passport, and I have to give my Brazilian passport to them. And I say, no, I will never leave aside being Brazilian. I love very much to be Brazilian. I really like it more being abroad, even if Brazil hates me. And I had to understand this also, this relationship of love and hate, of marrying and not being married, to belong and not belonging. For me, Brazil is a place of a lot of references, and always that I am lost, even if I am in Luanda, and even if I'm at home, I always come back here, even in my mind, in my thoughts. And it took a long time. I'm a person that has a lot of doubts. I have very little certainties. But I think that's great also. I am from Pisces, so we are always in the moon, let's say. So I used to ask myself a lot, how is it possible that although Brazil hates me, how did I reach this? Because it's a project of nation to end with us. I think that was in 2022 that the plan was that in 2022 we wouldn't have, Brazil would be a white country. And this didn't happen. And I asked myself, what happened? And these are questions sometimes I answer and don't answer. And one of the answers that I had was when I paraded. I'm from carnival family and samba school, but I had never paraded. My family had a tradition of watching the samba parades at home. I used to go to the rehearsals. I used to vote. My grandmother paraded until her knee didn't allow her anymore, but I had never paraded. And I paraded in samba school in 2022 when carnival was postponed to April. I was here. And then I wrote afterwards an article that said every Brazilian should be born with a ticket for a parade. You can use it. You have your birth certificate, and you have to have a right to parade whenever you want in your life.
So I paraded during Carnival by chance, but of course it wasn't really on Beija-Flor, which is the samba school that my dad loves. He's from Nilópolis, where the samba school is. And when I was, by chance but not by chance, I paraded in a car. It was the last car. And when the car, for those who don't know or not from Rio, they concentrate on Presidente Vargas, and then you make a curve to enter the Sapucaí, the stadium where we have Carnival. When they did the curve, I understood it all. Everything. From 1492 to now, I understood so much that I couldn't even explain, but it was then, the 15 minutes, the most important 15 minutes of my life, as a researcher, as a reader. It was everything. It was like Sueli mentioned on Friday, that when she went to Candomblé, she went as a scholar, and then she wrote a text and never wrote anymore. It was similar because it's a place of belonging, understanding. That area of Rio de Janeiro, this area of Rio de Janeiro, we know everything that happened here. And being there singing with those thousands of people in one voice, I usually think, will I sing well? Will I not know the samba, the lyrics? I sang everything I could sing. It's like a portal. It's something that you go through and you go to another space and time. And when I was reading Leda Maria Martins, she says, she explained much better than I do that it's memory, the memory that is in our bodies. This is how we got to 2024 with memory, and a memory that is unwritten, and a memory that is in Angola, it's in Berlin, it's in Luanda, it's in Kinshasa, it's in Rio de Janeiro, it's in Salvador, Sao Paulo. It's there, and we don't know. I can't explain. Maybe someone can. There were so many Yalorishas through here, and maybe they can explain it better than I can. But I believe that's it. It's so unexplainable that it explains itself. So to me, that's what makes me be here in this last panel of FLUP 2024. This is when you realize everything you had to live to reach a certain point in your life. I believe that's it. Amen. You spoke of spaces totally not hegemonic in terms of the nation, because it was not thought the nation is a project of genocide of the black people. So you brought another notion of nation in your answer. Thank you. Josephine.
I have a really hard time connecting to Germany as a nation, which is because the idea of Germany is so heavily tied to being white is being German, and blood and soil, and also language and blood and soil. So racialization works in very specific ways in Germany. I would say that people who could be considered white in Brazil would not necessarily be considered white in Germany. So racialization is on fire in Germany, I would say. So to me, Germany has always kind of been the heart of whiteness, I would say. So I have a really hard time connecting to Germany, yet at the same time, there is something about me that is very, very German. And I remember when I was in Brazil for the first time, this is just like a strange anecdote from when I was a teenager, but when I was here for the first time, I was 16, and I remember coming back home and saying to my mom, I'm so glad to be home. There's whole wheat bread, there's cheese and butter, and people are punctual. So there is something about me that is like very deeply German, yet there is also something about me that is very black. And this, in a way, gives me hope, because there are many people, not only like me, but there are people from Turkish descent, from like all over the place, and there are even Jewish people in Germany. So I think there is space to somehow create something that Germany never intended itself to be. And to me, there is something very hopeful in that. And I think this is a very specific moment. I would totally understand if people don't follow German politics, but this is a very interesting moment because the parliament is just dissolving in this very second, and we will have to vote roughly 7 months before we actually would. That is mostly due to people who are highly populist people who are very power hungry. And I think this is also the time in which we kind of have to take a step back, take a deep breath, and do what we've always done, which is fighting and working and creating and also dreaming. Because I think if you want to create something that is not what we have now, you have to look at the now, but you also have to be able to dream. So I think for me personally, I am trying to tap into Germany as a kind of dream space, which has not which is not necessarily tied to the reality of Germany, but kind of envisioning what I would want it to be and taking the steps that I feel I can take to connect with others. So I think much of what I'm doing at this very moment is actually connecting with others. For example, I started a series of readings of authors that there are 2 authors. We meet once a month, and we're kind of doing a fundraiser to support different organizations, because very many of the organizations who do anti-racist work, who do work against anti-Semitism, who support queer people who have experienced violence, are being defunded right now. So I think kind of doing this and creating a space where like 2 authors are talking to one another, and I kind of make sure that they don't necessarily know each other well, so they're kind of odd couples, but it works very well. And to see them talking kind of gives me hope, which is, this is what I want to create, people meeting and being able to talk about something to kind of gain deeper understanding. So to me, Germany is tapping into a dream that isn't yet.
Pensar em sonho.
Thinking of dreams and is how I would like to conclude this panel. In the end, I'd like to read another poem from Maya Angelou that to me speaks a lot about a dream project that has to do with the nation as well. But before that, I'd like to hear from you. What have you been dreaming of? What is your dream at the moment? Once I heard, and somebody was cursing me, that I was a utopian person. And I didn't think it was a bad word for me. It was a cursing. It was the only way that I could reach 2024 being like that. And I dream a lot. Practically, I dream a lot. I dream almost every night, really. I remember a lot from my dreams. I dream since very early. So I have a memories from childhood that I wanted to sleep earlier because I wanted to dream, even though I'm not one of these people that can control the dream, go and come back. That was my dream, to be able to do that, but I can't go back to my previous dream. But in a utopian way, I dream with fiction. I'm a fiction person. I really love that. I dream with my fiction book ready, that I dream that it's ready, my novel. And I'm sure that I could have other things already written and published that if I wanted to write nonfiction. I have 8 years of columns, and people ask me, why do you launch a book about the columns with a compilation of that? No, I don't want it to be my first book, because I'm very committed to fiction, and so it's the only way that I believe, because fiction has that role to me, to be able to invent what doesn't exist yet. And that's what I want to do. That's what I dream of. With a world that doesn't exist yet, that is very close, and sometimes I dream far away. I've been writing things 200 years from now, but I also dream of things that are very close. And I think that I dream of fiction with new worlds, new possibilities. I dream with the end of the 6x1 scale. I dream of people being able to live close to their workplace so that they don't have to spend 2 hours in traffic. I dream of a free transportation system. I dream of free water, potable water. I dream of sanitation for everybody. That's what I dream of. And this is another world, and we have to dream about new worlds. And that's why I'm so passionate about fiction. It's not that it saved me, and I don't believe that art has this role anyways, but fiction makes me see other possibilities, different than this one that we sometimes are massacred by. I dream of fiction for everybody. Eu, eu, eu me relaciono bem com isso. Eu acabei de escrever. Trabalhar contra a opressão, você precisa sonhar com alguma coisa que não é o que estamos vivendo agora. Isso descreve alguma coisa. E falando com outras pessoas.
Children having space and, you know, all kinds of people just being able to come together and live in a way that works for them. So I can very much feel what you were saying. I think for me personally, something that I dream of is actually being able to dream more and to describe what I see, because very often, like when I walk around, it's the very small things that I notice, and the very small things are also the things that make me very happy. It's, for example, I was sitting at the breakfast table with my mom the other day, and there was this bird, and this bird was watching us because he wanted something to eat. And I really loved how the bird kind of sat there. It was a beautiful chair and like a backdrop of, you know, all kinds of plants, and it was really warm, and there were some drops of water coming down, and the sun glistened in them. And I think that's what I want to do. I want to write something, you know, where like the small things of everyday life, I describe the beauty in them, because I think what I do in my work, even if I do something where we, you know, deal with oppression, is very much kind of grounded in storytelling. And I feel like for me, it's time to tell stories, you know, just beyond simply explaining oppression, but I think it's also very much a time where I just want to explore and kind of share the way in which I see the beauty in the world. I think that's where I am at.
Obrigada.
Thank you. Huh? I dream of a world with no frontiers, no borders, in which we can meet, understand each other, see each other, listen to each other, respect each other, and in which the identities are not boundaries, so that we can connect beyond our identities. A place where we can work our relationships beyond that. And in order to conclude this panel today, I'd like to thank Floop and everyone who is listening to us, and read a poem. I'll read it in Portuguese so that it's shorter, from Mayain as well. And it's called Without Borders and Audacious. It's a poem against Bell, her German unit. I'll be stubborn in being African, even though they want me German. And I'll make sure that I'll be German, even though that my blackness doesn't please you. I'll take another step towards the most farther away peripheral area where my brothers and sisters are, where our freedom starts. I will advance. I'll take one step forward and another step forward, and then I'll come back whenever I want, if I want, and I'll stay without borders and bold. Thank you. Amiga, não tem muito tempo não.
Não tem muito tempo, vai ser agora.
Vai rolar um abraço.
Cadê o Júlio? Alô, alô. Cadê?